Mark, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Simon. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Delighted for you to be here. And also an exciting conversation today all about purpose.
Yeah, purpose is a massive subject. I'm sure we could talk about it for hours and hours and hours. Let's try and condense the most important bits into this conversation.
Well, I think that the biggest conversation for us is where we start, which is going to be this comparison between inner versus outer purpose. I know that's something you're passionate about, so maybe we could start there.
Yeah, and this is something I really delved into in the past year. Most people, when they think about purpose, it comes when they reach a point in their lives or their careers where they just feel totally unfulfilled and disconnected in what they're doing. And we talked about before we started today about sort of this midlife crisis moment, But what's important to realize is that purpose goes very, very deep. It goes to the heart of the human experience. So when most people think about purpose, they think about the actions that they're taking, the work that they're doing, the business that they're growing, the impact they're having on the world, which is a really important part of purpose. This is what I call outer purpose, the actions that we're taking in the world in service of others. But as I've discovered in my journey over the last 12, 13 years in particular, human purpose goes way deeper than that. This is what I call inner purpose. And the big difference is outer purpose is the actions we're taking in the world. Inner purpose is our state of being. And our outer purpose can change as we go through life. Our passions change, our skill sets change, the way we can help others change. I'm sure you've realized it in your own life. I mean, when I think about my life, I think as a teenager, I was interested in football and art. And then 20s, I was interested in traveling. And then it became spirituality and now entrepreneurship. So it's changing all the time. The way I can help and serve others changes all the time. And yours will be different to mine. The difference with inner purpose is we all have a shared inner purpose as human beings. And this is the journey of what they would term in some lineages self-realization, self-actualization. It's essentially, it's the realization of who we truly are beyond our thoughts, beyond our emotions, beyond our conditioning as pure awareness. And this is a journey that is at the heart of the human experience. Not everyone is called to take that journey. We can probably go into it, but it was a journey that was kind of enforced on me because of the challenges I was having with my own mental health at the time. But, it forms the core of my programs now, because without that grounding, without a realization of who we truly are and that alignment, we can generally, when we go to create a business or we change careers, whatever it might be, we don't have that inner alignment. We can generally, not reach our full potential, or we could do more harm than good. We have to have that foundation of who we are. We have to have that balance. We have to have that level of fulfillment that comes when we're aligned with who we truly are, that isn't then dependent on what we do in the external world. So we're not attaching our happiness to external success, financial wealth, relationships, because we have that inner fulfillment that comes from just cultivating that connection to whatever you want to call it, self, source, spirit, God, awareness, whatever you want to call it. But it's the truth of who we really are that we all share. Deep subject.
Love it. I love it. I'm hooked already. I love this conversation. Yeah. So when we're thinking about that inner purpose, that's in fact, I think it needs to start from within, right? How do we know? Like I get ideas and thoughts all the time, and I get thought about I'm going to go in this direction, then I'm going in that direction. How do you draw it back to something which is your inner purpose? How do you know? Because that quiet voice inside you is telling you something. How can you kind of uncover it and get that voice raised?
Yes. Well, I think essentially what you're talking about here is intuition, which is a whole section of my Pathway to Purpose program that I help people with. And, first of all, I start in my programs with this inner work, is cultivating that, let's say, awareness of who we are. Three aspects, really. Awareness of our thoughts and the realization that we are not our conditioned mind. Our thoughts are generally kind of just compiled as we go through life, amalgamation of what our parents taught us, our teachers, what society tells us. So it's not actually who we are. And some thoughts are actually very helpful and positive and productive. Some thoughts, as we know, everyone experiences, are extremely negative and destructive. So, it's about cultivating that awareness of these thoughts as they come and go, realizing that it's not us, and the fact that you can actually follow a certain thought if it's productive and it's helpful, or you can let a thought go if it's not particularly helpful. So that really is essential. I call this the first stage of awakening, that moment when you realize you're not your thoughts. It's very common for people on the path of healing or self-development. That's generally the first step. Once you've got that, it kind of opens the door to something far greater, because until you understand that you're not your thoughts, you kind of just run through life on the same path, really. You're kind of very stuck on one linear path. As soon as you realize, okay, I release from that personality, basically, all my conditioned thoughts, you then have the choice as to which direction you want to take life. As I said, you can choose which thoughts to follow and which not. So that's crucial. The second aspect really is what I call emotional regulation. So this is a huge subject in itself, but it's essentially, and this is what they teach for Vipassana meditation, for example, bringing awareness from the mind, which I say is our conditioning, and back into the body, into the felt sense. The reason why that's key is because this is where our intuition lives. Everyone's heard about intuition, but as you said, this is more of a silent voice. In fact, it's not really a voice at all. Our thoughts are so loud and they dominate our consciousness, and our thoughts are focused purely on keeping us alive. That's why they're so loud. It's like, it doesn't want us to take any risk that might be a threat to our survival. It's kind of this old conditioning we've had in our early evolution, but it's kind of not so useful now because we're not under threat from saber-toothed cats or whatever it might be, but it's still incredibly loud, and it stops us from fulfilling our true potential. It keeps us small. It's not interested in our growth and our healing and our expansion and our awareness, because that is seen as a unnecessary threat to our survival. So the mind's job is basically to keep us alive. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with the ego. It has its job. But if we identify only with the ego, then we're going to live very narrow lives, basically. We're never going to explore our true potential. But this voice, as you rightly said, of our intuition, for me, it's more of a felt sense. And some people call it, the gut. We might say, it's your sense of your gut, or we might say it's the heart, for example. But essentially, it's a feeling that comes in and as often gets drowned out by our thoughts. But the reason why I talk about the awareness first, if we're able to detach from our thoughts, first of all, and then feel into our body when we make decisions, we can make decisions. For me, that's the voice of our higher self, you could say. The small self is the thoughts, the higher self is the feelings. So if you can quiet the mind for a moment with example meditation, and then feel through your decisions, what I mean by that is that we can do an exercise on this if you like, but it's essentially moving towards the choice that feels right to us, that excites us, that lights us up inside, instead of the thought of, oh, this is going to make us safe. This is what people do in their careers. It's like, well, I could go down this route. There's a lot of money here. Won't necessarily make me fulfilled, but that's what most people are chasing because it feels safe. But there's another option here. It's a bit unsure financially, but it would fulfill me. Most people will go towards the money because it's safe, but if we can detach from that and get in touch with our felt sense and start making decisions that feel good, that's how we can create a life that begins to align with our true self, as opposed to this false self or the ego, if you like.
So interesting, because essentially you're disassociating between the mind, which is thinking about risk and issues and saving your life, right? Don't step in front of that bus.
Yes.
Be careful of the tiger over there.
Yeah.
Versus your inner intuition, where you're actually thinking about, who am I? What do I want to become? And that you have like an internal inner conflict or an internal dialogue.
Yeah, there's always that.
Because quite often, oh, well, here's a job, big paycheck, great. Yeah, but I want to be an artist. Yeah. So there's an inner turmoil.
Exactly.
Or conflict that's happening between those. Or take the job. Yeah, but I want to paint. Yeah. Like, so, well, one's my dream. Oh, maybe it's just a dream. You shouldn't follow your dreams. You shouldn't follow your passions. Just do that as a hobby. Yeah. So that's kind of like the narrative that's going on. So with that inner conflict, how do you approach it? What's the best way?
Yeah, I think it's important to know, and really interesting what you said there. It's so true, because nobody teaches us this. I don't know about you, but my parents didn't teach me. My teachers had no knowledge of this. It's literally just like, okay, education is primed to point you in the direction of the best job, basically. And there's a certain narrow group of subjects, and then you have to choose a degree after that, if that's the path you want to go down. And there's no one's talking about, okay, what are your values? What are your passions? What's your purpose? There's nothing, it's just like, okay, so everyone's going towards the money, basically. That's how our society is set up, certainly in the West anyway. But, it's important to realize that there is always going to be a degree of conflict. Even I've been doing this work now for, 10 years plus, and still there's times when, real world example, I went on a retreat last year to Costa Rica, plant medicine retreat. We can talk about this big subject in itself. But, when I thought about this, what my mind was saying is, don't do this. It's expensive. It's terrifying. The idea of drinking plant medicine in the middle of Costa Rica with no necessary, healthcare. Please don't do this. Let's just stay at home. Let's just focus on what we're focusing on now. But when I tuned in to my body, in particular my center of my chest, which is the heart chakra, it lit up. It just absolutely lit up, and I just knew I've got to do this. And so. It's not a case of then just trying to shut the mind up. It's listening to the mind. Okay, thank you for your opinion, acknowledging that you have a job to do. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. But, the way I always define it is it has a really important job, the ego, the small self, the mind, whatever you want to call it, to keep us safe. But if your life is not in immediate danger in the next 20 minutes, then really it's like a false fear that is projecting. Yes, if you're aware of somebody that is trying to break into your home, great. You want that ego online to protect you. You want it to be front and center, and it's got that survival mechanism to come in place. If you're, for example, if it's trying to hold you back from investing in a new program or experience, whatever, and it's like, oh, there's too much money involved, I don't want to do that. Usually it's a false fear, and if you tune into your body, the gut or the heart, whatever's strongest for you, and you feel that sense of, wow, it's exciting, it's lit me up inside, whatever that means for you, then it's a journey of beginning to trust that felt sense. And it's different for different people. Sometimes some people are able to kind of override the mind, or not necessarily override it, but acknowledge it and move beyond it. But for some people, it can take months or years to be able to slowly build up that trust in the felt sense. Because initially it does feel, even though the heart might be lit up, there is that terror of like doing something new. Like we were talking about before we started today, the idea of creating a business when you've been used to getting that regular paycheck, your whole life, even though it doesn't particularly fulfill you. Scary stuff, and it will be for anybody. But, if that does feel like the right path for you, this is where support is really important. The idea of just stepping into that and doing it on your own is really difficult. But if you've got a coach or a community who can support you through that and just hold the space with you energetically, and while you process this really, intense fear, then, it really can help you then to begin to step towards that more fulfilling path. But it's never going to be easy. Like I said, even, when I'm choosing podcasts to go on, I'll literally go, I was talking to you before we started today about this one podcast. They wanted to charge me for going on, for example. And my mind was saying, in this instance, it was saying, well, maybe we should give it a go. We'll pay the money, and, who knows, might get a client out of it one day. I tuned into my system, and there was nothing. It was just dead. And so, in that case, it was a case of, again, thank you, mind, for, your contribution. But if this isn't lighting me up, then I know that that's my higher self saying, this isn't going to be best for your evolution. There's always gonna be a conflict, but yeah, I find that having support is really important.
What you said there around intuition is something I've been really investing time and thought, time more than anything else into in recent years, certainly the last 2 or 3 years. If I circle back to about 5 years ago, I went through quite severe depression for a period of time. And now when I think about that period in my life, I've also had someone call depression as deep rest. And it was like my intuition, my soul telling me there's something more for you here, and you need to remember. Like you need to remember you had dreams when you were younger.
Yeah.
What's happened to those dreams? And I feel like, I'm condensing a 3-year tough period into something I can reflect on now and saying that was possibly one of the most important stages of my life, to go through that, to kind of remember, to go, oh yeah, there is some stuff that you're supposed to be doing here. So I feel like leaning into intuition is critical. I don't know if everyone has this or has this inner voice, but I love what you said there about it being a felt. It's felt. You have thoughts, but this is just a feeling. But what happens, I found, is that you can numb that feeling. You can drink alcohol, you can take drugs, you can do whatever. You can numb it for a long period of time. I feel like I numbed that for decades. And maybe that's where slightly later life, 40s plus, maybe it starts to come out as, if you're not prepared to listen, we're going to make you listen.
Yeah, so true.
So I feel like, I don't know, I know you shared a tiny bit about your challenges or your journey. Is that how you felt? What was your experience?
Mine was a bit different, but I mean that's the classic, what they call a midlife crisis, isn't it? But it's not actually. It's like an opportunity to realign yourself, because, like I said, most people go through their lives in running on their conditioning, and chasing status and money, for example, at the expense of fulfillment and genuine happiness. And they get to this point in midlife, particularly people talk about men experiencing this, where it's like, they start, whatever it might be, buying a Ferrari or whatever it might be, and it's like, oh, they're going for a midlife crisis. But there's some kind of inner adjustment going on. And then it's up to the person. I love what you said. Up to the person. Do you want to then numb yourself to this dissatisfaction that you're feeling, this inner turmoil, this inner pain? And that can be a number of things. It could be alcohol. It could be buying houses or cars. It could be alcohol. It could be anything, exercise, even, anything to kind of numb that sensation. But there is a calling then to realign with who you really are, and it's up to us to take that step, because I don't know if you noticed, but the biggest regret people have at the end of their lives, statistically, you might have heard this before, but it is, I wish I'd lived a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And this is in a book by Bronnie Ware, who's a palliative health nurse. She worked with a lot of people at the end of their lives. And so this is where this goes. And I always talk about that in the start of my workshops. I'm like, this is how important this is. A lot of people think purposes are nice to have. Maybe I'll think about it at some point in the future when I'm successful. But as I say, someday never comes. You can put it off and off and off. But this is where it goes. People get to the end of their lives and they suddenly realize, oh man, I missed it, and it's only at that end point where it suddenly becomes very clear what they should have been doing in their lives. But then it's sad because it's too late then, and who knows what comes next, after we move on from this life. So it is really, really important. For me, it was a bit different in the sense that it was like a bit of a lightning bolt moment, not like a classic trauma that people experience, but at the age of 32, I went to Peru, and it was a kind of a 3-week trip in Peru. What people usually do, Nazca Desert, Machu Picchu, proposed to my wife at the Sun Gate overlooking Machu Picchu. Beautiful experience, went to the Amazon jungle. But it opened up something within me, a deeper connection, a kind of spiritual awareness. And I came back then to my job in the middle of London, in Southwark, near the city. And I'm in this high-rise building overlooking the city. It's a grey day. And I just look out at the view around me, and I just had this realization of how disconnected and lost I am. I just, from the planet, from myself, from my spirituality, and the contrast, I think, between, I've been piecing this together for many years since, the contrast between that experience in Peru and my life back in London created a intense energetic charge. That's all I can describe it as, because I didn't know how to face and feel through energy. I got stuck in my head, and it created what they would call in psychology disassociation. In shamanism, they have another term, soul loss. Essentially, when you have a split energetically on a soul level. This happens to people in situations of childhood trauma where they have split personality. A part of themselves breaks off because to take away the intense experience on a soul level, and eventually it comes back when the situation is safer, for example, to integrate that experience. It's a survival strategy in a sense as a human being, because that energetic charge is too much for our system. So it has to be taken away and then reintegrated at a later date. As I said, there's a whole, you can research this. Soul loss and soul retrieval is what the shamans would do. But essentially what this created for me was, from having a relatively balanced, stable and positive mind for 32 years, in a blink of an eye, I went from experiencing severe mental health issues, intense depression for no apparent reason, very, very negative and dark thoughts. It was almost like I didn't have any control of my mind anymore. There was all these seemingly dark energies coming in, and it was a horrific experience, and it took place over, I would say maybe sort of 7-8 years, really challenging. And there were times where I wasn't even sure I was going to make it through, but somehow I kind of held my life together, carried on working through this whole experience, and tried the Western routes that doctors push you down. Medication, for example, I found it just left me numb and empty, really. Psychology, counseling didn't really help me. But this was the whole point of the journey on reflection, was that it was pointing me towards waking up. But it took this really difficult and dark experience for that to start happening. I explored Buddhism, then I explored shamanism and plant medicine, and eventually onto the energetic healing practices that I help people with today. But, this is the journey, dark night of the soul. And, essentially it's like a deep cleansing, clearing all of that old conditioning out the way, all that old trauma, processing it so you can be realigned with who you truly are. But not everybody, when they go for the dark night of the soul, comes out in a good place, it's like I said, if you choose to numb yourself, you will stay in it for as long as it takes until you are able to face this stuff, so very, very dark, very, very difficult experience. But on reflection, then you can see why it happened. It essentially helping you to self-realize, to wake up and find your purpose.
It's amazing, isn't it, that your body, this is why it's so interesting about intuition. Your body has a plan. I'm saying the word body, that's not right. Your intuition, your soul has a plan for you.
Yeah.
And it's like we're not listening, like, or we numb, or we don't act in accordance with.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can only imagine when I'm just reflecting on what you're saying there, someone gets to a later or latter part of their life or towards the end of their life, and then suddenly they get the answers.
Yes.
That they were supposed to be following a particular path.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it.
Yeah.
Because of other people's expectations, or maybe it's not the right time. I can only imagine that, gosh, if you're 60s or 70s thinking, what did I, and also you loss of memory as well. What did I do with my life? Where did I get to?
Yeah. It's too late.
It's too late. And maybe these awakenings are a really important part for
Crucial.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. And I personally believe there's no mistakes in life. It depends what you believe, but on a kind of soul level, I've had enough experience with meditation and plant medicine to understand that we're much more than this human experience. And, I've had experience with plant medicine where the human experience dissolved completely, and I was still there in some way, shape or form. Time had dissolved. I forgot who I was as a human being. I couldn't even remember how I got there, how I'd taken this plant medicine. And it felt like I was just in this infinite space of awareness, really. It was terrifying for my ego. But when you have an experience like that, you realize, there's a lot more going on than we can take in with our usual five senses. There's a hell of a lot more going on. That is what I can't remember what we were talking about now. But
we're going to. I was going to ask you. Let's get a bit deeper, because I'm really interested in the plant medicine piece. I've actually got someone coming on in a couple of weeks who is a facilitator.
Yeah,
and she's going to talk us through what she does, how she facilitates, when they go through a trip, or so you're using mushrooms essentially.
Yeah.
So using psilocybin. So what happens, how she does it, what's the journey? So I'd love to know it from your perspective, kind of what was that for you? And then I haven't done one yet. So years ago when I was partying, I took mushrooms loads of times, but that was a very different experience when it was kind of in that sort of thing. But I'd love to know, kind of in that controlled environment, when you've taken, what did you see? Where did you go? What did you feel? I'd love to know more about that. Yeah,
it's a very difficult thing to talk about and bring back, because essentially you're going from a 5-dimensional awareness back into 3-dimensional, if you want to think of that. And so a lot of it you can't even talk about or explain. There's no words for what you can experience. But that what I was just talking about was my first experience with plant medicine ayahuasca, which is traditionally comes from the Amazon, has been used for thousands of years in the tribal cultures there. But even though it's illegal over here, there are places that you can find it. And that was my first experience in the UK. The classic thing, drank one cup, a couple of hours went by, nothing's really happening. I'll have another one without realizing the power of this medicine. And I always remember at the end of the ceremony, when everything had finished, I was like, oh, that was a bit disappointing. And at the end of the ceremony, you go into the kitchen, you have some food, and you start discussing your experiences. And I just started to take in some of the food, and all of a sudden, it was like reality started to break down. I couldn't differentiate. The walls started to break down into shapes and colors, for example, and that's what psychedelics and plant medicine do. They dissolve boundaries essentially. So I couldn't, for example, tell what was me and what wasn't me. Everything just breaks down into like a kaleidoscope of shapes and colors. I went back into the tent, and I remember saying to the shaman, "I think I need to come back to reality a bit here." She said to me, "Welcome to ayahuasca." And what followed was what I was talking about. Essentially, was like 2 or 3 hours of just ego death. Me slowly releasing from the construct of being a human being, and eventually forgetting that I would be a human being at all, forgetting that I'd drunk a plant, and ending up in some dimension of just infinite time, infinite awareness, connected to everything, which sounds amazing, but it was utterly terrifying for my ego, utterly terrifying. Because for the ego, the
ego's trying to control,
yes.
Right? It's trying to control, and then there's part of you that's saying let go. I can imagine that that moment.
Yes, because for the ego, it's like, well, if you're very attached to ego, to experience ego death is like you're dying. But what you realize is, no, that's just the like we were talking about earlier, that's just the human part of myself and who I really am, the awareness. And the key really is, and anyone will tell you who's worked with plant medicine, is surrender. You're just literally witnessing the thoughts, witnessing the ego and the terror, witnessing the confusion or the madness, whatever you're experiencing, and just feeling through it, not attaching to anything, not believing anything. And slowly then, the ego dissolves and you end up in these incredible places. And then slowly I remember having this realization of, first of all, I remember thinking, how on earth am I going to go back to my normal human life after experiencing this? Relationships, work, they all seem so insignificant. But eventually, eventually it started to crystallize again, this idea of being a separate self. And I remember drinking this plant at some point, in the past or whatever it was. And I remember being a human being, and it slowly crystallized, and it took me months to reintegrate this whole experience, which is another journey in itself. But I thought I would never drink again after that. But it's been over, I think 20 plus experiences now in Peru and Costa Rica and in the UK. So I just go, again, felt sense. Whenever I'm called, whenever I feel the medicine call me, it's not a path for everyone. I never recommend it for people because I know people have been out to Peru and they've come back in. It essentially brings your trauma to the surface. If you're not ready to face that stuff, it can actually bring you back in a worse state. It's incredibly deep and powerful work. It's really like pressing the accelerator on your spiritual and human development. But if it is the right path for you, there's nothing like it in terms of healing. And that was a very crucial part of my own healing. Working not only with the plants, but also with the shamans. They're just shamans doing this soul retrieval work with me, bringing me back together, my fractured parts back together. And I can honestly say now that, where are we now? 13 years later, I've moved beyond all those mental health issues. So it isn't, I always say to people, just because you're experiencing mental health issues, and everybody does at some point in their lives, it's not a life sentence. There is a path out there. It doesn't mean you have to go to Peru, for example, or drink plant medicine, but there's other very, very powerful healing practices as well. You don't have to go down the medication route or whatever it might be that doctors might push you down. That's important to know, because a lot of people, just kind of like numb themselves to it, take the medication and keep increasing the medication, and that eventually slows down your whole evolution. That's probably the best I can do. I could go into all kinds of experiences I've had in Peru and Costa Rica, but that was probably the most profound, that complete dissolution of who I was. And then, of course, for certain who you really are beyond the human experience. There's a lot more to us than we understand.
My best friend did it recently. and is actually facilitated here in the UK. And in that situation, he kind of went on his journey, and then at the end, he was allowed to drive home because because you return to self. And he said, although I was allowed to drive home, he said I just witnessed the creation of the universe, and I just didn't feel like I should be on the M4.
Yeah, I remember Terence. You may have heard of Terence McKenna. He spoke about psychedelics a lot, and a lot of people used to ask him about, will I be able to drive after, during the experience? During the experience, it's like how little experience people had of this stuff, and he would say, in every sense, no. Not only in the sense of driving down the motorway, but also you won't be able to drive in a sense of like we are now. We're able to control the body. We're able to think, for example, that whole idea of functioning in this reality is out the door, basically. And all you can do is lie back and surrender and just allow the experience to happen. Where people get in trouble is when they fight the experience, when they believe the fearful stories that their mind is telling them. For example, one guy in Peru for 2 or 3 hours was just screaming and shouting. And the way they work with the plants in Peru, indigenous shamans, is they will not help you. They will leave you to have your experience. If they go and help you as disempowering you, so you're literally there. If you go mad on your mat, good luck. You're on your own, basically. And what he said to me afterwards is that he had the belief that he sort of what the thought that he believed his mind was telling him was that you've gone permanently crazy, basically. You've gone insane. And so when he believed that thought, even though it wasn't true, he just kind of basically fell into this dimension of just insanity, basically. And when you're on medicines, time dissolves, and so it feels like you're there for infinity, basically. So it's utterly terrifying. So that's why it's really important. If you first of all feel called, is someone encouraging you to do this, or does this feel right to you? And then finding the right place, the right center, because all kinds of things happen to people at these centers that aren't, don't have proper safety measures in place, or don't have your best interest at heart. So you have to be very careful, go to the right center, trust your intuition. And I would say, if anyone comes to me and says, should I do this? I say, well, first of all, develop a bit of a meditation practice, try Vipassana retreat. Can you sit with yourself without distraction, for a weekend, for example? That's a great way to practice, because even in that situation, all kinds of thoughts come up. And, it's a very difficult experience, in a weekend retreat with Vipassana, but it's a good introduction to what you'll experience, because you have to be able to witness your mind without believing it and getting pulled around by it.
I'm a big advocate for meditation. I think I don't like saying these sorts of things, which is it's transformed my life, but it has totally transformed my life to the point where I meditate every morning.
Yeah.
And it's a very natural thing. I wake up, I go downstairs, darkened room, very early in the morning. I think it was 5 a.m. this morning, because I was out doing some of the stuff with training. So I think it was around 5 a.m. And it's just calm. It's self-inquiry. And a lot of it's just, I wonder what's there today. And that's where I get a lot of ideas. I get feelings, do this, need to do that, thinking about that. And, I think it's one of the most freeing things most freeing thing. This is why I put it into a daily practice, is just that it really helps you get to know yourself.
The true self. Yeah.
Your true self. And I was at a party last week, and someone who doesn't meditate came up to me and said, I read your book. He said, but I don't really understand it. And I was like, okay. And I tried to explain to like some of the parts. It was broken into mind and body. And I said, one of the first things is meditation. Tried to explain it, and they couldn't really comprehend what I was talking about. They were like, what do you mean getting to know yourself? I'm like, yeah, your intuition, what's inside you, what? Yeah. And that it kind of made me realize that some people aren't meant to get this.
Not for everyone.
My mum often talks to me about it. She goes, yeah, I don't really understand it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, not everyone is supposed to.
Yeah.
So I feel like all of these sorts of, whether this is healing or it's, my coach calls it self-inquiry, just getting to know yourself. For me, it's been critical to go on a path that is more true to me. And for me, that's career change. That's, I need to go on a more purpose-led path which is going to go in a particular direction. What I'm interested to know from yourself and your personal journey, when you started to lean into that, coming out of the mental health and starting to lean into self-inquiry, whether that's through medicines, plant-based medicines, or the meditation, what was the outcome for you? Like, what did you discover about yourself in terms of your purpose and your journey that was important?
Yeah. Well, it was everything, really. I mean, I love what you said there. It's the thing, like, even if you are called to that plant medicine path, which is a really accelerated path, as I said, it's crucial that you also have these grounding practices like meditation. I'm the same as you. Like, my non-negotiable in the morning is meditation. I do some basic yoga stretching. I have a gratitude practice, go over everything in life that I'm grateful for, just in my mind, and 30 minutes of meditation, Vipassana. Very simple. It is the simpler the better, I say, with meditation. It's just literally bringing awareness to the changing felt sense in the body. Like, the mind will take you off into thoughts about what you're going to do today or what happened yesterday. As soon as you're aware of that, come back to the felt sense in the body. Realize why that's important is because you're training. It's like going to the gym and doing reps, basically. Every time you bring your awareness back to the present moment, the body's rooted in the present moment. Every time you bring awareness back to the present moment, it's like a rep, coming back to your true self, coming back to your true self, coming back to your true self. And sometimes you can use an object like the breath, or some people use a particular sound, for example. But the reason I like the felt sense, if you can bring awareness to uncomfortable sense, like, for example, now, anyone who's watching or listening to this, you can just kind of feel into your center channels. This is the line down the middle of your body. This is chakra system, energetic centers. And if you just feel into that area, particularly between the throat and the stomach, there's usually a sensation there of some kind. And what I look for is the most uncomfortable sensation. It might feel like a bit of a tightening in the stomach or a restriction in the chest. But essentially what these are past traumas. And this is the root of them, energetic blockages within our system. As we feel into them, keep bringing awareness back, feeling into them, the body starts to process this energy. And this is what essentially unlocks our potential, because while these traumas are in place, these energetic blockages caused by when we don't feel through our emotions fully, it's kind of like a stream with boulders in the middle, and the stream of energy that comes down from our crown chakra is getting disrupted. The energy is getting disrupted by these boulders. As you feel into these energetic blockages, these traumas, the body starts to unravel them, release them. And what that does is the stream of energy that comes down for our body starts to be less disruptive. And what that essentially does is raise our energy levels. And, that essentially gives us more energy to make a real difference in our lives, together with, obviously, that crucial awareness of, I am not my thoughts. I can listen to my thoughts. I don't have to believe everything my mind is telling me, and connecting with intuition. So these practices are really, really crucial. I always say to people, even if you want to go down that plant medicine path, fantastic. I generally work with plant medicines every few months, but equally important is my daily meditation practice, one-on-one on my own. And also in the evening, I connect with my community, which is really powerful as a group. And, this is what I call energetic hygiene, which most people haven't heard of this term, but, most people brush their teeth twice a day and wouldn't think of not doing that, because what happens is that your teeth decay, basically, and, they have to get them pulled out when you go to the dentist. But most people aren't doing any energetic hygiene. So when stress builds up in a day, or anxiety or sadness or whatever it is, and we don't take time to feel through it because we're so busy, this stuff doesn't go anywhere. It gets stuck in our system. So by just taking time out to feel through this stuff so it can process with support, and that's the big difference, because when we're on our own, you may well experience this yourself, Simon, that mind can be very, very busy, because the system doesn't feel safe and supported. When we meditate with others, we get that sense of support and connection. Our body can then relax and let go and surrender. And that allows the system to relax and energy to be processed much easier. Very hard to regulate ourselves on our own, because we're essentially stuck in our own trauma and conditioning. We're looping in it. When we sit with someone else who is regulated and is grounded, our system templates theirs, and healing and processing can take place. That's something that I learnt towards the latter stage of my healing journey, and is a crucial part of my daily routine now to maintain my own alignment and well-being.
I never knew that. I never knew that in terms of meditating. I've never meditated in a group. So I never knew that your energies would then start to reflect that more of the group and become more balanced. Or,
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. I'd never known that.
And if you've got a mentor or a coach, I've worked with many mentors or coaches in the past, or shamans I've worked with, it's amazing actually. I'm not understanding the science of this, but your mirror neurons will actually start to template their system. For example, if you're called to create a life of financial abundance, not easy to do, and almost impossible to do on your own. But if you start working with somebody who's achieved that, your system starts to template theirs, and your mind starts to suddenly realize what's possible. So likewise, if you're looking to work on your well-being and you work with a coach who is established that for themselves, and you start sitting with them in awareness, your system will just start templating theirs. So it makes your path to growth and evolution much faster. You know, if you start sitting in awareness, in presence with somebody, it doesn't have to be physically like we are now. It could be online. I work with clients in Australia or the US. It doesn't matter. You can still experience healing and templating other people's systems via Zoom, for example.
Fascinating.
That's an amazing time we're living through.
It is. Yeah, it is. Well, technology is certainly bringing people together, but it's allowing people to connect in a brand new way.
Exactly, yeah.
Everything we've been talking about so far has been about the inner journey. Before we move on,
good point. We talked about the outer stuff.
I know we're going to go deep in this podcast, so we will go on to the outer journey in a second. But like, what haven't we covered on the inner part that you feel like is kind of relevant here? Because we talked about really getting in touch with our intuition, getting in, really understanding ourselves. We talked about self-inquiry. We talked about different methods of trying to find out and learn who you are.
Yeah.
And what's the right thing for you moving forward, or what right thing in your life? What's your soul's purpose? I think that's a good description of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we've missed there before we start thinking about how once you've gone on the journey, and the journey is forever, right? It's a continuous journey. There's not one thing.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
I think it's the soul's purpose, the soul's journey is taking you in a direction. Is there anything we've missed?
Well, I was just going to say exactly that. There is no end to it. You can't complete self-realization. And this is, I believe, why our soul continually reincarnates in human form over and over and over again. And I've had this shown to me with plant medicine as well. It's like even though it seems like I'm separate to you right now, and the person who's watching this is separate to me and you, it's actually an illusion. We're basically the same awareness expressing itself in different ways. And the whole game, if you like, we've created this game to understand different aspects of ourselves. We are essentially that force, that creative force, God, source, whatever you want to call it. And we basically just fracture ourselves up into these different aspects to understand a different aspect of the whole. That's the whole game. And we keep coming back over and over and over again until we're ready to start, going deeper into that experience. And like you said earlier, I've got members of my family who are not open to, if I talked like this to them, they would just kind of go blank and go, anyway, let's talk about the football on the weekend. They're just not ready. And that's fine. A lot of people aren't ready to have these kind of conversations, but I'm guessing as people are watching, listening to this, they are. It's a incredible moment if you are, on this journey towards purpose. I mean, it could have taken you 100,000 lifetimes to get to this point. And there's a huge shift happening on the planet, started in 2012, depending on what you believe. And humanity is waking up. And that's why a lot of people are thinking about purpose. And there's a big shift to, holistic medicines and these kind of approaches. So we're alive at an incredible time in human history. It's an incredible opportunity, to really accelerate your evolution as a human being. And as I said, we don't know what comes next. So now's the time. If we're gonna focus and do something about our purpose, then it's got to start now, basically, because this life will be gone like that.
Yeah, I always think about growth. Growth of existence. I'm trying not to butcher this. I'm trying to get this.
It's a hard thing to explain.
Yeah, the growth of existence. So if we think about 15 billion years ago, 16 billion years ago, whatever the numbers are, and someone, I was reading a book earlier saying that humans have been evolving over the last 5 million years. 5 million years, 15 billion years. right? So we can't even comprehend
No,
the
those
2
numbers.
minutes we've been around and for how long it's going to be around for. Like, we can't comprehend it. It's too big. They're just numbers. We can't put it into, and that's why I feel like there's something bigger, which is a level of consciousness and like awareness that I feel in certain individuals is happening around this time, which I've definitely never experienced before. Back when I was in my 20s, definitely no one was talking about this.
No.
Maybe it's the fusion of development of technologies which is allowing these types of conversations to happen, right? So if I go back into the 60s, 70s, or 80s, there will be literature, but that would be the only thing that I could have read. Someone's talking about the evolution of consciousness or those sorts of things. But now there's far more people who are experiencing something different, and they're able to communicate it via, the modern media, new media.
Exactly. And you providing a platform like this gives an opportunity, because how often do you see conversations like this in the mainstream media? It's not happening, is it? No. And yes, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever way you look at it, it took some horrific events happening in the last century for this to take place. And you saw like this consciousness awakening happen in the 60s, which was a bit of a false start. It started and then it obviously got squashed. But this feels different. This is really integrating society, and everybody's talking about it. A lot of people are having plant medicine experiences. Meditation is part of a lot of people, I wouldn't say everybody, a lot of people's routine, or yoga or something like that. So yeah, there is a shift, and this one feels like it's going to be embedded, and it's going to last this time. That's the way it feels to me. Yeah, even though there's still conflict in the world and difficulties, as there always will be. And that is, I think, an essential part of awakening. It's something, old energy has to be processed. If you look at it on a global scale, what happened in those world wars, it was like old energies were being processed by the collective. And when that is moved out, like it happens with us, old energy is moved out, make space for something new. That, unfortunately, it has to happen like that, But yeah, this shift feels like it's the one that's going to change everything. Yeah. AI and everything else is coming as well with it now. Who knows what's going to happen with that?
There's the technology advancements coupled with human consciousness advancing, like, it's an exciting time.
Yeah,
it's a really interesting time.
You know what's going to happen. Yeah,
and this is, so everything we've been talking about so far has been your internal world, what's going on inside you. The next part of that purpose is what happens outside of you, the people around you, the job you go to, the thing you're doing, or the things you're doing in life. How does all of this manifest itself into reality, or into this world, if we will?
Yes. Yeah. This is then the next step. I'm working with 5 people in my current program, and it's interesting actually, because they're at different stages. One of them is already established with a business, and he's thinking about making a bit of a pivot with his business. Some of them are just getting clear on the concept of how they want to help others. But, a few of them aren't ready to make that step to outer purpose at the moment. And this is why I focus on inner purpose first in all my programs and everything I talk about, because that's what's most important. That ultimately, as human beings, that's what we're here for, is this self-realization. I always say to people, the outer purpose stuff, which you could condense into our unique way of serving others in this lifetime, is how I like to put it, our mission. That's like the icing on the cake, really. But you've got to have this foundation of awareness and energetic hygiene and intuition first. Otherwise, what happens when people build a business, they will tend to just recreate the same experience that they had in their career, because they haven't done any of the healing work. They haven't cleared any of their conditioning. So they create a business and, they're overwhelmed in their career and disconnected. They create a business and it's misaligned, and they're overwhelmed and disconnected again, and it's like the same pattern repeats. Whereas it's really important to do that healing work first, to clear out all that old conditioning, so make space for something new, a new alignment. And also, when you do decide to pivot careers or build a business, I'm always very clear with my clients on this. It's not like this thing is going to fall in your lap in 6 months' time, this beautiful aligned business and this life of abundance financially. What happens is the universe goes, all right, if you want that new version of reality, you want to create this new thing, you're going to have to face all the stuff that's in the way, all this trauma and energetic stuff, blockages that are blocking that at the moment. For a lot of people, they aren't ready for that. So up comes all the self-doubt, the limiting beliefs, the procrastination, the overthinking, and they go, oh, this must not be the right path for me. And they go back into the comfort zone. Oh, I'll try another career. Up comes all the self-doubt, limiting beliefs, procrastination. They retreat back into the comfort zone. Oh, well, maybe I'll build a business. Same thing happens, all that. So this is why establishing a daily practice of healing and energetic hygiene is important, and support, because you need a way when you start stepping out of your comfort zone to process that energy as it comes to the surface. And if you have that, you step out your comfort zone, you take some time out to feel through all this really uncomfortable stuff. It eases, you move through to the next level of your expansion. So first of all, it's really important to have that in place, that support. And community support is integral to all my programs. But essentially, the path that I then start to take people on towards outer purpose, first of all, we go into what I call the hero's journey, the story of our lives. And it is really important to sort of plot our life story and to sort of go through the really important integral parts, like the parts that we can then, the goals in our journey that can then enable us to help others. So, for me, it was quite clear, that call to adventure in my 30s, the dark night of the soul that I experienced then, from then on, the darkness, and then the mentors that helped me come through that, and then the wisdom, the skills that I gained, coming through, and then, on the hero's journey, you return home then. But it's really important to sort of go through that, because then you can see, okay, I can appreciate my journey. I can appreciate what I learned, and then how I can help others through my journey. So that's a really important step that people really resonate with. Can't be rushed though. It's not like something you can do in a week. This is a lot of journaling. AI can't help you. I bring AI in at some point, but at this point, it really is about journaling. It's about going inside and just writing, journaling about your experiences and what you gleaned, what you learnt, and the skills you developed in that dark night of the soul. Often there's a dark night of the soul in there somewhere. And then it's a journey really of delving into values. And it's always interesting. I remember when my coach started discussing values, I was like, what's the point of this? Or, why have I never explored this before? And I think that's a reason why I ended up in a career in advertising where I felt completely unfulfilled and disconnected, because I didn't even know what my values were, never mind being able to create a career from my values. And so when I went for my values, I was like a series of words on this page, and I started to feeling to what resonated for me: spirituality, healing, purpose, adventure, freedom. There was a few that really stood out for me, and I journaled around them. And I was like, no wonder I'm disconnected in my career. None of my values are found in my career that I'm building. I'm advertising mobile phones, I'm advertising baby formula and investment funds. My values are nowhere to be seen. So that's a really important step then. Writing about, journaling about our values. And again, this is something we have to take time out and do for ourselves and get really clear on. Then there's a journey beyond that. And I'm going for a 3-month program here quite quickly of, there's a very famous Venn diagram called the Ikigai, which I'm sure you would have heard of.
Ikigai?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Venn diagram, where you can start to plot the intersection between 4 segments, which is your skills, your gifts, your passions, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for, essentially. And again, there's some journaling to be done. What are you really passionate about? What are those things you do when you're not being paid for it? What are those things you intuitively are pulled towards, and you just love to do on your weekends, for example, and just forget about earning money at the moment. Just what are those things that really connect with you on a deep level? Your gifts, obviously, you start to explore those as you go through the story. What the world needs is really important, because I speak to a lot of people, and it's like, I'm thinking of building a business trading Pokemon cards. I'm thinking of building a business, an app for, helping home buyers or whatever it might be. And I speak to them, why are you so passionate about this? What impact is it going to make on the world? It's like, well, I don't know. I think probably it's going to make some money, but, I'm not sure about that. But why this is really important is if you don't create a business then that is aligned with your story and your values and your passions and your unique skill set, and ultimately what you can earn money from is important as a business. It's very difficult to connect on an emotional level with people. When people can explore my LinkedIn, it's very much, I'm always talking about my story. I'm always communicating from my values. I'm always talking about my challenges, my faults, my failures, and that's really important to connect with people. It doesn't matter what it is, but it has to, if you're building a business, it has to really be tied with you have to be able to talk passionately about it. Like we are, can you talk for your business for 2 hours on a podcast, for example, but no problem. Then it's something you're aligned with. I don't worry too much about making a 6-figure business. If you can talk about something for 2 hours on a podcast, that's a good sign that you're aligned with your passions. And if you can communicate your story around it, why are you so passionate about this? What were the key moments in your story that led you to this? Then when you communicate your message via video or via post, people can really, the right people will really resonate with it, and they'll connect with them on an emotional level, and then they'll move towards you. But if you haven't got that, and you're just like trying to sell something you think will make money, then it's not going to stand out. It'll get lost in the sea of noise on the rest of these channels. So those are really important steps. And I can go on to client avatar, and there's another piece of work I do around visualizing your ideal future day, which is really important because a lot of people create businesses and they take on a load of people and they expand, and they realize they're utterly miserable and stressed out. So you have to be very clear initially, what is your ideal future day? Where do you want to get to? And that will act like a kind of North Star as you grow a business or a career, so that you know what you're aiming for and you're not pulled around by the ego, which is like pulling you towards money or pulling you towards, creating a status of buying the big house when you don't need it, or the car, or whatever it is. You're just like, okay, I know what my ideal day is. I'm going to build a business to suit that ideal day, not to kind of project some idea of status to the rest of society. So it's a lot of work, but it drops for people at different times. Some people, they get it within a sort of month or so, like, yes, this is it, this is what I want to do. For some people, it can take a lot longer, depending on what they've got to work through.
I think we should talk briefly here just about the money. And the reason why that's important is because I know plenty of people, business owners, including myself, like people that have chased money for a period of time, and then actually, once having attained that financial position, their life has got worse.
Yeah.
For me, I was at a position in my life where I should have been quite unquote the happiest. I had the house, the wife, the family, all those things. And I had a good place in finance. However, why was I the most depressed I've ever been? I've got another friend that built a business, sold a business, made a lot of money, nearly 8 figures, and now is totally lost. I don't know. Trying to have to reskill, rethink, what am I doing? Where am I going? One of the conversations we had, he was like, well, he's made the money and that was supposed to fix everything. Because we're supposed to, that's what we always dreamed about back in our 20s, which was, well, when we get this level of success and we get the money, life will be amazing when we're millionaires. Of course it will be. And, if anything, there was an amazing quote. There was an amazing quote off someone who'd sold a company for 952 million. And he'd written on this Twitter, which was, I find myself in a totally unrelatable position and privileged position where I have no reason to get up off the sofa.
Yeah.
And he just said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And he said, I'm actually very worried about myself because I'm just falling. That's what he wrote on a tweet. It was like a shout out.
Yeah.
Very famous person. I can't remember his name now, but it was a famous person who sold a very big company, obviously to sell it for nearly $1 billion. But he just said, I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, his story's been tracked and he's gone back to university and he's studying psychology.
Wow.
So he's gone right back. The money's literally
worthless. Not worthless. I mean, yeah, I love that. It's
but I suppose the point I was trying to make here is that, listen, money is important. It absolutely is, and it builds like this. It's important, right? I've got a family. I need to ensure I want them to have, my children have good education. I want them to have good housing. I want to make sure my wife is well looked after. Like, that's critical. Like, that's one of my values as a father, to provide. So money is important. That's not, of course it's important. but I feel like there's a stage in your life where purpose becomes more important.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, you have to be aware and responsible, absolutely, but then, you know, you don't want to look back when you're 60 or 70 and go, I missed 20 or 30 years of my life because I didn't follow a passion, or I didn't find my purpose and follow it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
I feel like, sorry, last point here is that Jordan Peterson he said it's your moral responsibility to go after your dreams. For the people around you, for you inside, because he said you've either got a person who's gone after an adventure and therefore has got some life experience, or you've got someone who's now facing depression and that's bad for you, your family, etc. around you. So maybe you could add some colour to that in regards to money, purpose, what's important.
Yeah, it's such an important point, and there's all kinds of celebrities who've had this. You know, judging to Jim Carrey, he always, I think his quote is something like, "I wish everybody could have everything they desire, just so they could realize that it's not the way." You know, and you know, Russell Brand, all kinds of celebrities have got to this point where it's like they've reached the peak in terms of what society would see as success and happiness, and they go, this is empty. I'm at the top of this mountain and I just feel empty. And on a smaller scale, you know, I kind of had this at one point where I was receiving a kind of automated income that was coming in. And I was like, oh, great. It wasn't like a massive amount, but it was enough to cover everything. And, you know, I was faced with that same realization. Okay, I've got this financial freedom to an extent. I've got time freedom, but depression started creeping in. I was like, what do I do? Like, I go to the coffee shop, look on social media, I walk around the forest, I come back, and the weekend's the same. And it was like, I could feel this depression creeping in. I was like, man, this isn't good. Obviously I got my healing practices that kind of helped me through that period. But that is the kind of myth of society, isn't it? You just kind of like, okay, once you've achieved time of financial freedom, you'll be happy. But obviously it's a really important point when people get there, actually, because they realize then, okay, because what a lot of people do is they spend their whole lives pushing towards that, not getting there, and then getting to the end. And as we said, they realize, oh, I missed it. It's too late. But so it's actually a really important point to get to that stage and then realize that it's not the way. And then obviously what people do is they begin this journey inward, hopefully. Otherwise, they just end up kind of distracting themselves with their money, you know, buying more and more cars or houses or whatever it is, and they just keep going and going and just piling up the misery and the misery. But yeah, then there's an invitation then to seek what really matters, and it is about finding purpose, you know, because it happens to a lot of people in retirement. They go, oh, they spend their whole lives just like counting down to retirement. I want to retire, building up the money, retire. I want to retire when I'm 55, when I'm 60. They get to that point, and then their life is over in sort of 10 years because there's no purpose. There's nothing driving them. There's no reason to live, you know, and disease or something takes over and their life ends quite early. That's actually it's not the most important signal of longevity, but it's a really important factor, purpose, you know. And for me, it's a bit of a myth, retirement. I never want to retire. I want to do this work as long as I'm able, you know, and look at, like, you know, whatever you think of him, who's the president of the United States, the guy's in his 80s, you know, so you can, especially if you really look after yourself, and there's all kinds of insights around science and longevity out there at the moment, you can be working 70s, 80s, and if you really are aligned in your work and you feel like you're making a difference in the world, you can do so, you know, far longer than people would have in the past, whereby they're doing physical manual labor jobs and they're retiring in their 60s because they can't do it anymore. And, you know, just kind of like, you know, just sitting around in retirement, you know. So, yeah, purpose is a vital factor. And for some people, they realize that. The great thing, though, about a person like that who's achieved the financial abundance and then realizes, oh, okay, that I was on the wrong path, I need to adjust towards purpose, is that they have the resources then to invest in whatever it might be, the experiences, the program, the coaches, whatever, who can help them refine their purpose. So money is important in that respect, because you need to be able to invest in yourself. Like I was talking about earlier, I've invested in different coaches myself, different programs, plant medicine experiences, traveling experiences that have helped me really to cultivate this purpose in myself. So money, as you said, is really important. You need to be able to support yourself on that journey, support those around you. And there's nothing wrong with earning money from your gifts as well. Some people have a big problem around selling and earning money from what they do, but it's just a energetic exchange, and you help somebody, and it's right that you should receive something back. And there's nothing wrong with living a prosperous and abundant life. We all have that potential, I believe.
It's interesting what you're saying about not wanting to retire. I think that's when I read Ikigai.
Yeah.
That was part of the philosophy, the Japanese philosophy, which is they don't retire necessarily. They actually have a word for it in Japanese, from what I've understood from Ikigai. And therefore, this actually helped me a lot on my journey, which was, what can you do well into later life up until you're physically not able? 70s, 80s, and quite often, they're off there gardening, they're sewing, they're doing something of value, which they can be in flow state for, and time will just pass, and they've had a good day. And when I was reading those chapters, it really resonated with me, because I love working, and I've got really no interest in not working.
Yeah.
And even if I'm 70, I can't see that I wouldn't want to get out of bed and go to work.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's when you're finding your purpose. That's a telltale sign.
It is. Yeah.
What would you do that you would do for free, and actually you would even pay for? Like, some people, maybe you want to be a DJ. Maybe I'd pay for that experience, or I want to be an artist, or, I just love gardening. What would you do that you can just look forward to and you can do with ease? And for me, that was a big part of learning. Well, what can I just do with ease? What's just really natural to you? Something that you actually feel like is so easy, and not even easy, it's challenging, but it's simple. It just comes to you. And that's where I feel like Ikigai is really valuable, because it, in that kind of diagram, what can you just get up and do and continue to do until you're no longer physically able?
Yeah.
That's a great definition.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Whereas, you speak to most people, particularly in the corporate world, and it is this countdown to Friday, countdown to payday, countdown to retirement. And these are the best years of your life, and you're spending it, putting off your happiness until you're 60, 65, and who knows how much longer you'll have to live when you get to 65. Yeah, it is really important. And, if you are in that state, then it's a sign you're out of alignment, and there's some adjustment to do. And I always say to people, it doesn't mean you got to quit your job straight away and, just kind of like start playing music or gardening, whatever it is for you. And, for me, it goes to another level if you can then create some kind of business from it where you're earning money from it, because then you can support yourself doing your passion. And that takes it to another level, because you can really kind of dedicate your life to it. But initially, yes, it might mean that you keep your job to support you financially, so you can continue to invest in yourself, and you're doing it alongside. That's what I did. I kind of built my coaching business alongside my career in advertising until it was, until it could support me completely. So yeah, it's really important not to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, oh, this job, I can't stand it anymore. You can have both for a period of time, just build slowly. If it feels right at some time, it starts placing your income, go fully into it and help as many people as possible if that's what you want to do. I mean, my purpose, the reason why I know I'll always be aligned with my purpose is because it isn't just tied to a business. My business, helping senior professionals, entrepreneurs create thriving, purpose-driven lives. But, even if I'm not doing that, say that just business is dissolved for some reason, I get no clients, this is the importance of inner purpose, because that doesn't affect my inner purpose. My happiness isn't tied, or success isn't tied to that business, because a big part of my wider purpose is, the evolution of the collective consciousness, and that includes myself. So there'll always be work to do on the inside, whether I'm kind of working on my business or not, there's an infinite amount of work to do for me, healing, raising my awareness, evolving myself. So that's why, purpose shouldn't just be tied to the work you do. It has to go deeper than that. And if you realize that, real fulfillment, real happiness, real success is found by healing yourself and raising your awareness on the inside, then you're not so attached to the rise and fall of a business, because that's going to happen. Like the seasons of the earth. I wrote a post on this week. Sometimes a business is booming and it's, money's coming in and clients are coming in, and then, that old model might fall away at some point, like the seasons, like the autumn, and then it just rebuilt again. So you have to have a way to, create that stability, that alignment within, so that you are not so attached to what you're building, your outer purpose, even though it's important, not as important as your inner purpose, that inner, alignment.
And that's interesting because you're always in alignment with who you are. But if you, want to say, pick the wrong direction, maybe you think, actually, that's a really great business, I'm going to go and do that. And you find out you're kind of, even if you find success, I feel like there's a level of emptiness, which is kind of like what my friend was talking about.
Yes.
Although he achieved significant financial success, was like, hang on, there's emptiness here. It's what I experienced as well. Like that self-actualization within Maslow's hierarchy. Hang on, I've self-actualized, but I feel like shit. What's this about? And I feel like that's because your soul hasn't come along for the journey.
You're out of alignment. Yeah, and like you say, the soul has been whispering to you in the world about it, but in the felt sense all along the way. But because the ego's been in the driver's seat the whole time, your true self hasn't got a look in, and so that's the problem most people have. It's like they're identified with the mind, with the thought process, with the ego. It's driving them around. Basically, they're in the passenger seat with no say. And then you get to the point where it's like, hang on, we've ended up somewhere here that I don't like. And then it's a process of not what people think. A lot of people on the spiritual path think is the idea is you got to kill your ego, you got to destroy the ego. But that's more ego. You're not going to be able to destroy the ego. What you want is to move the ego into the passenger seat and move the awareness, the intuition into the driver's seat. So you can listen to the ego, and it's kind of like trying to pull you off track, but you can just say, okay, thank you for your input. I come back to the present moment. I come back to the felt sense. I trust my intuition, and I just carry on that path. But it's important to realize that the ego is going to fight you all the way, because that's his nature.
And something important about, so once you're on the journey, you're starting to lean into intuition, you're going to be faced with challenges. And I feel like a lot of those challenges are your inner challenges, things like limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
So how do you start, it's almost like a rewiring of the brain maybe, but how do you start, combating that? Let's just say you feel like you kind of have a direction to go in. You've lent into your intuition. You've done it over many months. You're like, yeah, this is it. And now, but I'll do it next week.
Yeah.
I'll do it Monday.
Procrastination. Yeah.
It's just, it's easier to go out with friends this weekend. And I don't know when to, I don't like posting on social media, or, I'd like to start now, but I don't really know what the first page looks like. What are those? How do we combat those limiting beliefs as we're on the journey?
Yeah. And it's perfectly natural, and it's going to happen. That's the most first place to start, is you expect this to happen. It's basically a trauma response. And like I said, when you decide to change an aspect of your life for the better, the universe says, right, face all your old trauma first. And so that's what that is. There's nothing wrong with limiting beliefs and procrastination. The key is, what most people do is they kind of get lost in that. And again, identifying with the thoughts, I can't do this, or this is too much, or, what if I make a mistake, or whatever it is. But, if you get stuck in that mode of thinking, then you are going to stay stuck. But like I said, the invitation then is to bring awareness to the uncomfortable sense. Whenever you've got limiting belief, there's another feeling in the body somewhere. It can feel like a tightening. It can feel like a collapse. It can feel like a pinching. But there'll be something in the torso area, energetically in the body, and that is the foundation, the real foundation of the trauma that's powering the belief. This is the problem with mindset: is that, okay, you can try and change your thoughts, you can try and think positively, but they'll keep coming back, because the real core of the limiting belief is a trauma in your energetic system. So the invitation is to, at times when you're confused, overwhelmed, panicking, whatever it is, the invitation is, instead of taking action from that energy, because if you do that, you'll just create more and more of that energy. You'll create a business that is founded on that kind of low vibration energy. You'll get low vibration results. In other words, mediocre results. But if you take the invitation at times like that, when you're really struggling mentally, to focus on the inner work, focus on the inner purpose stuff, feel through the really uncomfortable sensations with support, like I talked about earlier. Sometimes inaction is the best course of action. And this is what I talk about when I talk about creating a aligned life. When you're feeling low, when you're feeling confused, when you can feel yourself procrastinating, that's the time for the inner work, the healing work. On another time, when you're feeling aligned, when you're feeling inspired and energized by your purpose, that's the time to take action. Write the post, do the podcast, build the website, whatever it is, because you'll create the actions then will be founded in a higher vibration energy, a more positive energy, and ultimately you're going to get more positive results from that business that you create from it. So that's a simple way to create an aligned life. It's just checking this out. How am I feeling right now? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Okay, the best work I can do is on the inside. Take some time out, bring your mind and body to rest, feel through those uncomfortable sensations. Wake up tomorrow, okay, I'm back on it. Now I'm going to build from this. I'm going to create from this, step into the outer purpose work. That's really important. Just trusting your own body and your own intuition.
And when we're trusting your intuition, I also feel like you could entwine this with, I'm thinking about atomic habits, which is just, you start really small with baby habits or tiny habits. So like part of that might be you want to get fitter or you want to get in better shape. But someone goes off and buys a really expensive gym membership and they go a tiny bit, and actually, within a month they're still not going. But actually what you're talking about here is like, okay, the way to beat procrastination in this instance is just do something tiny. Just do something small. Just move it forward. In that analogy, instead of buying the expensive gym membership, can you go for a walk for 10 minutes? Can you start doing that? Can you go for 10 minutes today? Can you go for whenever it is, 20 minutes the next day? Slowly build up and put yourself on a plan where over 90 days now you started walking and you weren't walking before. Now you're exercising, you're moving for the first time. Yeah. And I feel like this, whatever it is, whatever that purpose is starting off small.
Yeah, I agree. And breaking it up is important. Like,
because you're creating some evidence for yourself.
Yes, exactly. And you've probably done this work yourself, the goal setting work. I did this when I started sort of planning out my business. It was like, okay, what's the long-term goal? And I'll break it up into yearly goals and then monthly goals. And then eventually you just got daily steps. Okay, can I just reply to these emails today or create a social media post? And it's just little steps. I'm also a big proponent of MIA, which is what I call massive imperfect action. Again, you have to check in with yourself and make sure that you're coming from a aligned place when you do this. But I'm of the opinion, whatever I'm doing, it's like, okay, make a start. I don't care if it's not great. Like I'm going to build a web page. Instead of, sort of obsessing over every minor detail of the copy, I'm going to, write something rough, put it into ChatGPT. I'm going to get the copy there, find an image. I'm going to get something out there online. And then I'm going to refine it as I go. Whereas I think a lot of people, it's like they get really caught up in this idea of, I can't put this website out there because I've really got to get every detail right. And then it just gets overwhelming and they never take any action. But if it's just like, don't worry about being perfect, get something out there, make a start. And as you go, you can refine it and improve it based on people's responses or what you notice. Just an example of creating a business, example of fitness, can you, like you say, can you get out there and just do the walk? It doesn't have to be a 5-mile run at this point. Just get some progress in the right direction. And, you start feeling a little bit better and, it doesn't have to be that you're doing it every day even, can you just do it once a week, because otherwise it can be very overwhelming to the mind and, it'll just stop being a challenge. You get stuck in procrastination. So, but yeah, I'm all for that. Just kind of like get something down on the page, make a start and you'll feel so much better when you've got something out there, even if it's not 100% perfect to start with.
Say that again. So it's
I had to think about it myself a minute. Massive imperfect action.
Massive imperfect
yeah, something I learned
action.
in entrepreneurs communities. Yeah, you just got to get out there. Do the video. It's going to be rubbish. Do the first podcast. It's going to be rubbish. Get the first post out there. No one's going to respond, but you're creating forward momentum. But, just make sure when no one has watched your video, when no one has liked your post, trauma response, you're going to feel like limiting beliefs. Self-sabotage is going to come up. Okay, now's the time to feel into that stuff.
Now, I'll talk to that because for a really long time, I wouldn't even use my name on anything I was doing on socials. It actually was up until 12 months ago. So I wouldn't use my name. I just didn't feel comfortable with it. And it was my coach, and actually my cousin as well, as he pointed out, and he was like, why aren't you using your name? You've got to be more authentic.
Right.
And I can't even tell you why. I just wasn't comfortable at the time. But the good thing about the fact that everyone starts with 0 followers and 0 listeners and 0 of everything is no one's actually listening and no one's actually watching. Well, that's great. So you can create the post, you can start writing the first pages of the book, and it doesn't matter because you should expect to fail the first thing. So it doesn't matter. And the amount of people that maybe they take notice for a month or two in terms of friends and family, they also will get on with their lives and they won't care really quickly. So I love that because, listen, I have failed with this podcast time and time and time and time again. And I've kind of failed my way to a point of, it's starting to get a bit better now.
Yes.
Like, and I feel like that's been my career journey. You know, go to work every day in sales, cold calling, having to write emails, trying to get someone, convince them to, you know, have a meeting to, you know, go on a sales campaign with them. And you learn from failing.
Yeah.
That's the reality. And I feel like it's getting closer to failing. Like, how can I get closer to failing today? And I feel like making peace with failure. You're doing a post, no one likes it, no one comments. Great. No one saw as well. It doesn't matter. So it's just like, it's great that we all start with no one looking and watching.
Yeah.
Other than there's friends and family. And actually, I feel like that's the bigger fear because you're starting to make a change because you want something different. And your reality is you fail in public, but no one's actually watching. And that's the funny thing. But some people around you might go, what are you doing there? What are you doing with those posts? But not really.
Yes.
It's all in your mind.
Yeah.
More than anything else. And you feel like an imposter to start with, or who is he to do that? Or who is she to do that? Or the reality is no one actually cares and no one's listening and no one's watching. So I feel like that massive action that you need to take, just fail in public, just be comfortable with it really soon.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's another trauma response, you know, the kind of imposter syndrome it's going to come up. You know, who am I to be a coach? I remember I had that one. Who am I to be a podcaster? Who am I to be an entrepreneur? You know, that one's going to come up, the self-doubt. But yes, I mean, it's it's basic mindset, but can you redefine failure? I mean, you only really fail, you could say, if you want to use that term, if you give up, don't you? Otherwise, it's just learn. I learned.
That's what it is. Yeah, it's just learning. You're just learning. You do a post. The success in that is that you did a post.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because the funny thing is when the mind starts taking over, the mind will start saying, even if you did 50,000 likes, but the mind says, well, you should be at 100,000 likes. You're going to feel like a failure. Like, so it's almost like you just need to continue just to do the thing.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like when you're choosing, you're listening to your intuition, you're trying to find out what is the thing. What's that inner purpose? What's that inner voice telling you? What's the direction that you're going on? It needs to be something that you can keep doing it without the claps, without the likes, without any of those things. For me, which is a really massive thing, and it's really funny to me, my mum talk about it all the time. Whenever something was going badly for me, she would send me a message, you're supposed to be a presenter.
Wow.
And and even like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, she was like, you're supposed to be a presenter.
Yeah.
And something bad would happen at work, and she's like, yeah, but you're not doing the right job. You're supposed to be a presenter. And it, even a year ago, I remember having a barking argument with her where I was really down one day and, you know, baby and this and all this stuff happening and bad things had happened at work. She was like, you're supposed to be a presenter. And I was just like, it's not the right time. Why are you doing this? Blah, 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 blah. And I remember reflecting, writing things down, meditation on that. About a couple of months later, and I went, yeah, I think I'm going to have to lean into it. It was my fear. It's my fear. It's the only thing I ever wanted. And it was my fear that was keeping me away from it. So my mum, even my mum has known all of my life.
This is your path. Yeah.
You know, and because she saw me do a lot of presenting when I was a lot younger. And it's just like that little voice and someone else just saying, there's a path for you. You need to start listening into it. It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing that other people around you often sometimes know.
Yeah, this is. I love what you said about, you know, it's something that if you're not getting those external success validation, that you are going to keep doing because you just love it so much. I mean, last year, for example, again, I think I wrote a post on this today actually, which was, you know, last year the business wasn't going well. You know, a natural kind of seasons with business. You know, this previous year had been really successful. Last year, the clients were drying up. Suddenly, my marketing campaign wasn't working. My tactics weren't working. It was like, wow, okay, my business is disappearing here. But because, I'm so aligned with this work, it wasn't like everything was tied up in the business. As I said, I spent some time on my own healing, working with the plant medicines, meditating in my community. And, I'm still, even if the clients were drying up, it was like I was still coaching people. People were still coming to me, asking me for advice. It's not like everything was tied up in the business. And as I said earlier, it's like my purpose is, it's really important with purpose that it isn't just about helping others, serving others. It has to encompass yourself as well. That's why I say my purpose is helping humanity remember its true purpose. So together we can raise a collective consciousness. And that includes me. So I'm still alone my purpose. I'm still doing the work. And eventually, of course, when you've done enough of the healing, done enough of the clearing and the difficult stuff that came up around my business, found a new mentor, found a new community and rebuilt it from a place of true alignment. So yeah, it's knowing that no matter where you are on your journey, you are going to be tested, challenges are going to come up, but no, real confidence. And I always say well-being is not feeling happy all the time. It's the ability to be with your present moment experience. If you know you can be with whatever comes up, then you got the confidence to just face it, whatever it is. Keep going.
I really loved our conversation today. And it's amazing how time just flies.
Was that? I don't know how long that was.
Been about an hour and a half. Yeah, wow. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we have a closing tradition on this podcast where we all do some ayahuasca.
Yes. So you won't be hearing much from us for the next 5 hours.
So we leave the cameras on, and then me and you go on a very deep journey together.
The report on it afterwards. Wow.
And then people can witness it. Maybe at some stage we'll be able to do something.
Come with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
The next one.
Thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
It's amazing thing is by the way, I've just done through the first line of this conversation. There's 8 more points that I was hoping to get to. So you're going to need to come back so we can go into the other bits. But if someone's listening today, they'd love to get in contact, learn more about you, have some coaching or be engaged. What's the best way of reaching out?
Yeah. Well, as we talked about throughout this podcast, trust your own intuition here. How you feel. And the mind might be saying one thing, but if you really feel like lit up by this conversation, really inspired by what we've been talking about, trust that, and I make it very easy for people to get in touch with me. I'm on LinkedIn, Mark Dallimore, you'll find me quite easily, Instagram as well. But my website, thebuddhaspot.com, the reason why it's called that is because the Buddha and his teachings had such a profound impact on my own journey. But thebuddhaspot.com, you'll find all kinds of free resources. I've got a free guide, 10-step guide to purpose, which can start your journey. There's my, inside that is my free purpose alignment assessment. So you can actually see how aligned with your purpose you are right now. Series of questions that will help you determine that and give you proactive next steps to deepen your alignment. And then, at the end of that, there's an option to book into my next free workshop, Unlock Your Purpose workshop. I'm actually holding one in a couple of weeks' time. So plenty to explore there on my website. If you want to go deeper into this, or just connect with me on the channels on social. Feels right.
A lot of what you're doing, is that online or is it face-to-face? Or?
Yeah, I have had one client who wanted to connect face-to-face, but I do think it's amazing the time we're living in, and we can do a lot of this healing work, on the opposite sides of the world. It's incredible. And my clients, as I said, are in America, Australia, and even though there's a massive physical distance, energy is not restricted by space and time. So for example, I always say to people, if someone's watching this podcast now and I start shouting and screaming, the person watching, whether they're watching live now or in 5 years' time, will have a visceral reaction in their body. In the same way, when I'm working with someone, if I project ground, balance, regulation, their system will template that. And so, it doesn't matter if we're in the same room like now or, we're on the other side of the world. It's I can do so much work online. And the coaches I've worked with, it's all been online as well. So, and I've had massive breakthroughs in my life.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? So true that, even through the screen, that you can still pick up on the energy, the feeling. But that's television, right? Like, watching television on a particular program that can still convey a feeling or an energy or those sorts of things. So, I can understand actually coaching through, doing it remotely, doing it online, you can still get all the benefit. And also don't forget a lot of the benefits through self-reflection after, being asked the right questions for you to then think about. Because the one thing I've learned about this journey is it's not quick, right? It's
No.
not something that, oh yeah, 2 weeks later I found my person. All that is probably the mind trying to give you an answer.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it took about 5 years. I mean, it's still developing. 3 of that was, you better hold on here. 2 of it was probably coming out of the real negative stuff, which I actually had to lean into something completely different first, which was fitness, mindfulness, those things. And it's only now at the top end of that, I'm like, hang on, what are you supposed to be following then? What am I supposed to be doing in my life?
Yes.
It's only 12 months ago. Like, now I'm like, I feel a bit more aligned. I know where I'm going.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
It's a long old journey, and I don't feel, that's why it's the benefit of working with a coach, because these are not quick answers.
No.
You know, you need to, and some of it's very hard, very painful. You've got to work through a lot of trauma and healing. But like, if you don't do it, the regret you could have in 20 years time when you're 60.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I don't want to be in that situation. You've got one great life.
Exactly. And
Gotta do it.
that's always what I always point to. It's that, you know, whenever I'm kind of doubtful on my journey, I just remind myself of that biggest regret people have in their lives. And like you said, it's you know, some people will say, oh, I got a 2-month program. You're guaranteed to know your purpose at the end of it. You cannot promise that. I've got a 3-month group coaching program. People come out at different stages. Some people need to go a bit further with me. Some people come out and say, I've got it. You know, I know what to do. But it's an infinite journey, you know, and my outer purpose, as I said, is shifting all the time. It shifted from last year to this year. It's becoming more refined, targeting different people that I think I can help. But as you said, that inner purpose is the same always, that self-realization journey that we all share. And that is the stability, the foundation that can really support you on that journey to your true potential.
Mark, I loved our chat today. You've done really well to withstand the heat. It's warm in here today. I mean, we are.
Hottest day of the year,
yeah, gosh, it's a warm studio today, so you've done really well. All right.
I survived.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Simon. Pleasure.
Appreciate it.